Hey guys, tonight we're going on a journey, not to some epic battlefield or a royal court filled with intrigue, but to the coziest, warmest, and most dangerous place in the medieval village, the tavern. Imagine you're trudging down a muddy, unlit path, the only sound a squelch of your worn leather boots and the far-off hoot of an owl. The air is cool and damp, carrying the faint, sweet scent of wood smoke and something else, something fermented and yeasty. Up ahead, a single, flickering torchlight spills from a doorway, and the sound of boisterous laughter and the low murmur of voices reaches you. This is where you're headed. This is your destination. You're about to step into a world of camaraderie, forgetfulness, and, quite frankly, a level of drunken abandon that you probably won't survive. The water here is not to be trusted. The food is, well, an adventure. And the only thing that will genuinely quench your thirst and lift your spirits is a tankard of thick, dark ale. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is, and we can all share a little moment in time. A quiet corner of the world. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You push open the heavy oak door, and a wave of sound and heat washes over you. The air is thick with the smell of smoke, spilled ale, and damp wool. Inside, the room is dimly lit by a roaring fireplace and a few scattered tallow candles. It's a single, bustling room, with heavy wooden tables and benches crammed with people from all walks of life. The miller, flour still dusting his tunic, is arguing jovially with the blacksmith, whose calloused hands grip a tankard. A pair of travelling merchants huddle in a corner, their cloaks still flecked with mud from the road. The chatter is a low, constant roar, punctuated by shouts of laughter and the clatter of tankards on wood. This isn't just a bar, it's the social heart of the village. It's where deals are struck, gossip is traded, and the day's hard labour is forgotten in a haze of alcohol. Historians still argue whether the tavern was more important than the church in daily life, but for now, you just need a drink. In the Middle Ages, getting wasted was a little different from today. For starters, the drink of choice wasn't some complex cocktail or even a hoppy craft beer. It was overwhelmingly ale. This simple brew, made from water, malted barley, and yeast, was the lifeblood of the people. It was a caloric staple, a source of nutrients, and, most importantly, it was a lot safer to drink than the local well water, which was often contaminated with all sorts of delightful things you probably don't want to think about. You see a woman, her face flushed from the heat of the fire, moving between the tables with an easy, practiced grace. This is the alewife. She's the real power broker here, the one who keeps the community running. Her brew, made in a big iron cauldron right in her own home, is what brings everyone together. The ale isn't highly alcoholic by modern standards, probably more like a modern light beer, but the sheer volume consumed meant people could and did get properly sloshed. A quirky tidbit you probably didn't know is that some alewives would advertise their fresh brew by hanging a broom or a green branch over their door, a kind of medieval neon sign. It was a simple system, a continuous cycle of brewing, selling, and drinking, with the alewife at the centre of it all, a pillar of the community as essential as the parish priest or the lord of the manor. And as you find a spot on a bench, a heavy wooden mug is placed in front of you, filled to the brim with a dark, opaque liquid. The aroma is earthy, breedy, and just a little bit sweet. The journey into medieval inebriation has officially begun. You take a long, deep gulp, and you're instantly part of the party. A warm sense of belonging washing over you as the ale's subtle kick begins to take effect. You're not just drinking, you're participating in a ritual as old as the village itself. As the ale begins to work its magic, you notice the alewife again. She is a figure of considerable importance, not just a server, but a true pillar of the community. Her name, you might hear someone whisper, is Agnes, and she lives in the small cottage attached to the tavern. The brewing process takes place right in her home, often in a large cauldron over the fire. This isn't a fancy, industrial operation, it's a simple, continuous process. You see her now, wiping her hands on her apron, her face ruddy from the heat of the fire. the same fire that heats the brew she is so proud of. The alewife's role was a mainstream historical fact in medieval society. She was often one of the few independent businesswomen in a village. Her trade was respected, regulated, and absolutely essential. A quirky tidbit, however, is that her hat, a tall, conical headpiece, was sometimes worn as a signal to passers-by that a fresh batch of ale was ready. A precursor to the modern tavern sign, you watch as she pours another round, the dark, frothy liquid sloshing into a wooden tankard. The men are talking, laughing, their voices getting a little louder and their movements a little more expansive as the evening wears on. A couple of travelling merchants are now playing a simple game of dice, their conversation more animated than it was when you first arrived. A group of young men in the corner are singing a bawdy song about a farmer and a chicken, their voices happily off-key. The ale, for all its simplicity, is a powerful social lubricant. It dissolves the rigid social hierarchies of the day. If only for a few fleeting hours, you see a humble peasant sharing a joke with the village bailiff, something that would be unthinkable under the cold light of day. The tavern, under the alewife's watchful eye, is a place of temporary equality. The alewife's reputation is everything. If her brew is good, she thrives. If it's weak or tastes sour, her customers will find a new watering hole, a fate that could spell ruin. This is why you see her tasting her own product so often, a small sip from a cup to ensure the quality is up to snuff. This constant testing and minor adjustments are part of the craft, an art form passed down from mother to daughter. This tradition of the alewife as the brewer is so deeply ingrained that historians still argue whether the modern stereotype of the witch, with her cauldron, pointy hat, and cat, often kept to catch rats in the brewery, is a twisted caricature of these respected, independent women. The hat for advertising, the cauldron for brewing, and the cat for pest control. It all starts to sound a little familiar, doesn't it? A simple misunderstanding, perhaps, that turned a pillar of the community into a figure of fear. As you sip your own ale, you reflect on this. It's not a light, fizzy drink you're used to. It's thick, almost like a thin porridge, and surprisingly filling. You can feel the calories going down with every swallow, a welcome sensation at the end of a long day of physical labour. It's not just for a buzz, it's a necessary form of sustenance. You see a man at a nearby table actually eating a hunk of bread and a slice of cheese with his ale, treating it as a liquid meal. This was a common practice. Many people would drink ale for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, as it was a more reliable source of hydration and energy than the local water. The sheer practicality of the drink is staggering. It's a testament to the ingenuity and resourcefulness of a society that had to make do with what it had. The alewife's role was also one of community arbiter. She could be counted on to know the latest news and gossip, to settle minor disputes, and to offer a listening ear to those in need. She was a combination of a bartender, a therapist, and a town crier, all rolled into one. Her presence gives the room a sense of order, a feeling that even in this boisterous, chaotic space, there's a gentle hand guiding the proceedings. You're not just drinking a beverage, you're participating in a social institution, a nightly ritual that binds the community together. As your tankard empties, you know you'll be back tomorrow night, ready to see what the alewife's brew and the village gossip have in store for you. The warmth of the fire and the low hum of conversation are starting to lull you, a comfortable feeling of belonging settling over you. You're not just a stranger in a strange land, you're a patron, a temporary resident of this warm, smoky sanctuary. With your tankard now empty, the alewife returns, her movements efficient and practiced. She doesn't need to ask if you want another. She simply fills your cup again, the rich, breedy scent rising to meet you. The reason for this constant consumption is simple and a key historical fact of the era. Ale was safer to drink than water. This was not an idle preference. A town's well or a village's river could be a breeding ground for all sorts of nasty things. Waste was often discarded directly into water sources, and without a modern understanding of sanitation, the result was a cocktail of bacteria that could lead to dysentery, cholera, and a quick trip to the local cemetery. Brewing, however, involved boiling the water, a process that naturally killed off most pathogens. The fermentation process itself also created an environment hostile to harmful bacteria. So, while you might think it strange to start your day with a tankard of ale, it was, in fact, the most sensible choice for staying healthy. This simple truth meant that the ale you were drinking wasn't a luxury, It was a daily necessity, a fundamental part of the medieval diet. This is a mainstream historical fact, but a quirky tidbit is that children, too, drank ale, albeit a much weaker version. It was known as small beer or small ale and was an essential, if slightly odd, part of their daily caloric intake. Imagine your modern-day parents handing you a weak beer for breakfast instead of orange juice. It sounds absurd, but in medieval times, it was a perfectly logical and life-saving choice. As you sip your new, fresh ale, you appreciate the subtle nuances of the flavour. There are no hops, as those were not yet a widespread ingredient in English brewing, so the taste is less bitter and more earthy and sweet than a modern beer. The bitterness was often introduced by other herbs, a mix of local plants known as grüt. These could include anything from bog myrtle to horehound, each adding a different flavour profile. The exact recipe for grüt was often a carefully guarded secret, passed down through generations of alewives. Much like a family's secret sauce today, historians still argue whether gruit's primary purpose was for flavour, preservation, or a kind of mild, head-clearing intoxication. The truth is probably a little of all three, but the mystery adds a certain charm to your mug of brew. You feel the warmth of the fire on your back and the low rumble of conversation in your chest. The ale is a social lubricant, but it's also a form of liquid bread. It's thick, rich with calories from the barley, and it sits in your stomach with a satisfying weight. A joke is told at a nearby table, something about a monk and a donkey, and the laughter ripples through the room, a warm, genuine sound. It's a moment of respite from the endless toil and hardship of daily life. The threat of famine, disease, and war is always present. But in this warm, smoky room, with a mug of ale in your hand, those worries feel a world away. The brewing process itself was often a communal event, with villagers sharing a big vat, or mash tun, to make their own batch. The process was simple but labour-intensive. You'd mash the grain, steep it in hot water to create a sugary liquid called wort, and then boil it. Once cooled, the yeast would be added, and nature would take its course, turning the sugars into alcohol. The whole thing was a beautiful, slightly chaotic art form. There were no temperature gauges or precise measurements. It was all by feel, by smell, by intuition, and in the skilled hands of the alewife. That intuitive knowledge created the very drink you're holding, a liquid testament to survival and community. You take another drink, a silent toast to the thousands of anonymous brewers who made it possible for you to sit here tonight, safe from the dangers of the world outside. If only for a few hours. Now, let's step away from the common ale and talk about something a little more special. As the night deepens, you notice a new group entering the tavern. They're dressed in finer clothes. The cloth of their tunics and cloaks a richer colour, the leather of their boots softer. One of them, a man with a finely trimmed beard, gestures to Agnes, the alewife, and you watch as she produces a different kind of vessel, not a simple wooden tankard, but a polished drinking horn, perhaps even one with a silver rim. This is a moment of historical significance, a glimpse into the drinking habits of the medieval elite. The drink she pours is not ale, it is mead. This is a mainstream historical fact. Mead was the drink of the wealthy and powerful, a symbol of status and celebration. You see the man take a long, slow sip, a look of pure contentment on his face. This is not the thick, breedy liquid you've been drinking. Mead is made from fermented honey and water, a process that creates a beverage that can range from a light, sweet wine to a potent, golden elixir. Because honey was a valuable commodity, mead was far more expensive to produce than ale, which relied on the more accessible barley. This made it a luxury item, reserved for special occasions like weddings, feasts, and royal banquets. A quirky tidbit about mead is that the term honeymoon is thought to have originated from the ancient custom of a newly married couple drinking a month's supply of mead to ensure fertility and good luck. The idea was that the honey month would produce a moon or a child, a quaint and slightly cringe-worthy concept by today's standards. As you watch the nobleman, you can't help but feel a pang of curiosity. The aroma of his mead is different from your ale. It's sweet, floral, and complex. A world away from the earthy, yeasty scent of your own drink. You wonder what it tastes like. The sheer variety of mead was a point of pride for its makers. Spices like cinnamon, cloves, and ginger were often added, as were fruits like cherries or raspberries, each creating a unique and often powerful brew. This was not a drink for daily consumption, it was a celebratory indulgence, a way for the wealthy to distinguish themselves from the common folk. Historians still argue whether the popularity of mead was a result of its taste, its intoxicating properties, or its symbolic value as a drink of kings and gods. The answer is likely a bit of all three, but for now, it simply serves to highlight the vast chasm between your world and theirs. You notice a travelling minstrel has entered the tavern, his lute case slung over his shoulder. He takes a seat near the fire and begins to tune his instrument, his fingers moving with practiced ease. The atmosphere shifts slightly, the boisterous laughter and shouting giving way to a more appreciative, expectant hush. This is another layer of the medieval drinking experience, a reminder that the tavern was a place of both simple pleasures and cultural enrichment. The minstrel will sing of heroic deeds, of tragic love affairs, and of far-off lands, transporting the patrons to a different world, if only for a few moments. But your world is here, in this smoky, fire-lit room, with your simple wooden tankard and your warm, nourishing ale. The mead is a beautiful but distant dream, a reminder of a life you don't lead. You take a final, satisfying gulp of your ale, the heavy liquid settling in your stomach. It's not as refined as the drink in the nobleman's horn, but it's yours. It's the drink of the people, a beverage that has sustained and comforted generations, and tonight, it's all you need. The minstrel begins to play a simple, melancholy tune, and the low hum of conversation resumes. A beautiful symphony of a community at rest. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the music and the atmosphere wash over you, a feeling of deep, uncomplicated peace. The minstrel's music fades into a low hum, and the boisterousness of the tavern resumes. As the drinks flow, you begin to notice the sheer variety of drinking vessels in use. This is a mainstream historical fact. Medieval people didn't have one standard glass or mug. You've been drinking from a simple wooden tankard, but you see others with earthenware mugs, rough and heavy, or even cups made from leather, which feel surprisingly warm to the touch. The wealthy group, as you saw, has drinking horns, some of which are likely polished and decorated with silver. A far cry from the utilitarian vessels of the common folk. The drinking horn is a particularly fascinating piece of history. A quirky tidbit is that its shape makes it impossible to put down until it's empty, forcing you to finish your drink in one go. This design likely encouraged a form of rapid, competitive consumption that would feel right at home at a modern frat party. You're not just drinking a beverage, you're participating in a challenge. This leads to the next point, etiquette. You might be surprised to learn there were almost no formal rules for drinking in a medieval tavern. It was a place of wild abandon, where the usual strictures of society were loosened. The social rules were simple. Take your turn, don't hog the tankard, and don't pick a fight with a man who looks bigger than you. Beyond that, anything went. As you look around, you see the communal nature of drinking in action. In some cases, a single large vessel is passed around a table, each person taking a deep gulp before handing it to the next. This shared experience creates a sense of camaraderie and trust, a physical manifestation of the communal spirit. You see a pair of friends clinking their tankards together in a rough, satisfying sound, a simple, timeless gesture of friendship. Historians still argue whether the clinking of cups was originally meant to spill a small amount of liquid into the other person's cup to prove it wasn't poisoned, or if it was simply a loud, boisterous gesture of unity. The former sounds a little too dramatic for a Tuesday night at the pub, but the latter seems right at home in this raucous, smoky room. Either way, it's a gesture that endures to this day. You take another sip from your own tankard, the wood feeling smooth and warm in your hand. You notice the simple, unadorned craftsmanship, a testament to its practical purpose. This isn't a delicate glass to be admired, it's a tool for getting the job done. The lack of handles on some of the mugs also forces you to hold them with two hands. A gesture of respect for the brew and its maker. It's a small detail, but one that speaks volumes about the culture of the time. You can't simply hold your drink in one hand while you gesture wildly with the other. It demands your full attention, a simple but effective way to slow down and enjoy the moment. The room is now a chaotic symphony of sound and motion. A man at a nearby table is telling a story, his voice rising and falling with dramatic flair. His friends are hanging on every word, their faces illuminated by the flickering firelight. Another group is engaged in a low, intense game of some kind, their heads bowed in concentration. You feel like a ghost observing a snapshot of a different time, a different world. But the shared experience of a drink with friends is timeless. The ale has dulled the harsh edges of the day, smoothed over the rough anxieties, and replaced them with a soft, fuzzy glow. The vessels may be different, the customs may be rougher, but the purpose of this place, this nightly ritual, is clear. It's a haven from the world, a place to belong. You finish your ale and slam the tankard down on the table, a sound that feels both powerful and satisfying, a punctuation mark on the end of a long day. As you finish your drink, the noise level in the tavern seems to ratchet up a notch. The music from the minstrel has been replaced by the boisterous shouts of men engaged in various forms of revelry. This is the next phase of the evening, and a mainstream historical fact. Medieval drinking was often accompanied by simple, rowdy games. You see a group of men gathered around a table, and they're not just chatting. They're engaged in something called Hunt the Slipper, a game where a slipper is passed from hand to hand under a table while the person in the middle tries to guess who has it. The game itself is innocent enough, but the boisterous laughter and the occasional playful shove are all fueled by the seemingly endless flow of ale. The games were simple, designed to be played with minimal equipment, just the people and their drinks. You might see a game of knucklebones, the medieval equivalent of dice, being played with a quiet intensity. The clatter of the bones on the wooden table, a sharp punctuation mark in the din, or you might see a more physical game, like wrestling or arm wrestling, a chance for a man to prove his strength after a few mugs of ale have given him a bit of liquid courage. A quirky tidbit about these games is the liar's dice, or Perudo style of game that was often played. It's a game of bluffing and deception, and it's particularly hilarious to watch as the alcohol takes its toll and the bluffs become less and less convincing. You can see the pure, unadulterated joy on their faces, the kind of laughter that comes from being truly, deeply relaxed and a little bit tipsy. The purpose of these games wasn't just to pass the time, it was to build bonds, to blow off steam, and to forget the daily drudgery of life. The day's work was hard, the living conditions were rough, and the future was always uncertain. The tavern was a sanctuary from all that, a place where for a few hours you could be a child again, playing a silly game with your friends, your only worry who had the slipper. Historians still argue whether the games were a spontaneous outlet for high spirits or a structured part of the social ritual of the tavern. It's probably a bit of both, a mix of planned fun and drunken improvisation that made every night a unique and memorable experience. You see the alewife, Agnes, observing it all with a tired but fond smile on her face. She knows that this is what keeps her business running. She's not just selling ale, she's selling an experience, a sense of belonging, a temporary escape. You lean back on your bench, feeling the rough wood against your back, and take a moment to simply observe. The air is thick with the scent of wood smoke and spilled ale. The sound of laughter and shouts a constant symphony. A man stumbles from his seat, his hand held out to a friend, who pulls him back down with a chuckle. There are no bouncers, no security, just a community of people looking after each other, a kind of unwritten code of conduct that says, "We're all in this together." The games are a way to burn off some of the excess energy and emotion that has built up over a long day. The laughter and the competition are a harmless way to let off steam, a necessary release in a world that often demanded stoic endurance. You feel a sense of profound calm settling over you as you watch, a kind of peaceful contentment that comes from witnessing people simply enjoying themselves, uncomplicated and unrestrained. You decide to order another round, and this time, you ask for a bit of bread and cheese to go with it, a perfect companion for the hearty ale. You're ready to join in on the fun, to be a part of the chaos, to feel the joy and the warmth of the community. The merriment in the tavern is a world away from the scene you now imagine. You've been magically transported, finding yourself not on a rough bench with commoners, but on a polished wooden seat in a great hall. The air here is different, scented with roasting meat, beeswax candles, and the subtle perfume of expensive imported spices. The walls are hung with tapestries depicting grand hunts and epic battles, and the ceiling soars high above you, crisscrossed with heavy oak beams. You are at a medieval feast. And it's a mainstream historical fact that these events were not just for eating, they were a meticulously choreographed display of social hierarchy. Your seat at the long, U-shaped table tells you everything you need to know. The higher up the table you are, the closer you are to the lord and lady of the house, who are seated on a raised dais at the head of the hall. You're somewhere in the middle, a respectable position, but a clear step down from the knights and nobles at the very top. This hierarchy dictates not only who you can speak to, but also what you drink. Down the table, the servants and lower-ranking guests are drinking a simple, everyday ale, much like the one you enjoyed in the tavern. But as you look toward the dais, you see golden goblets filled with clear, ruby-red wine. This is where you encounter a quirky tidbit about medieval dining. The quality and type of drink you received were a direct reflection of your social status. The best wine, often imported from France or the Rhineland, was reserved for the lord, the lady, and their most honored guests. It was a luxury, a symbol of their wealth and connections. As you descend the table, the wine gets progressively watered down, and you might even find yourself drinking a local, much less refined version at the very bottom of the table. The ale is back, but it's likely a lesser brew, maybe even the weak, small ale you heard about earlier. The drink wasn't just a beverage, it was a visible marker of your place in the world. Historians still argue whether this strict social stratification was a source of resentment or if it was simply accepted as the natural order of things. For a person in the Middle Ages, life was full of preordained roles, and your place at the table, with its corresponding drink, was just one more aspect of that reality. The system, for all its rigidness, provided a kind of certainty. You knew your place, you knew what was expected of you, and you knew what you could expect. There was a strange comfort in that, a predictability in a world that was often anything but. As the feast progresses, a servant brings a flagon of spiced mead to your table, a brief, welcome taste of the high life before you are returned to your more ordinary libations. You take a sip, the sweet, honeyed flavour a sharp contrast to the earthy taste of the ale you're used to. It's a fleeting moment of luxury, a reminder of the world that exists beyond the village tavern. The feast is a symphony of sensory experiences, the crackling fire, the loud, boisterous conversation, the scent of a dozen different dishes, and the constant flow of drinks, each one a signal of your place in the grand, intricate dance of medieval society. You feel both part of the group and yet keenly aware of your position within it. This is not the easygoing camaraderie of the alehouse, it is a more formal, more calculated kind of fun. You clink your cup with a neighbour, a simple gesture that transcends the complex rules of the feast, and you take a final sip of your drink, a silent toast to the strange, beautiful, and rigid world you've entered. You are back in the familiar warmth of the tavern, the fire crackling and the conversations buzzing around you. But now, you find yourself on a new leg of your journey, one that takes you from the boisterous village to the quiet, contemplative halls of a monastery. This is a crucial, mainstream historical fact. Monks were among the most skilled and dedicated brewers in the Middle Ages. They didn't just brew for their own consumption, they refined the craft, turning it from a simple necessity into a complex and often profitable art form. You can imagine yourself walking through the arched, stone corridors, the air cool and damp, and then stepping into the monastic brewery. The scent here is different from the village alewife's. It's more controlled, more precise. The monks, you see, had the resources, the time, and, most importantly, the discipline to perfect their brewing techniques. They had access to better ingredients, and they meticulously recorded their recipes, a practice that was almost unheard of outside the monastery walls. This led to a more consistent and often higher quality product. A quirky tidbit is that the monks often drank beer not just for sustenance, but as a form of liquid bread during their fasts. Some monastic orders would brew a thick, dark beer known as liquid bread to sustain themselves during the Lenten fast, as it was considered a food and not a drink, thus not breaking their vow of abstinence. It's a rather clever loophole, wouldn't you say? You watch a monk, his hands gnarled but steady, stirring a vat of bubbling wort. His face is serene, focused. This isn't a chaotic, rowdy affair, it's a holy profession. The brewing of ale was seen as a gift from God, a way to provide for the community and for the pilgrims and travellers who sought shelter at the monastery. The monasteries became centres of brewing excellence, and their beers were often sought after for their quality and consistency. You see barrels of it stacked neatly in the cellar, a testament to the order and efficiency of the monastic life. Historians still argue whether the monks' primary motivation for brewing was piety or profit. While it's true that they provided a much-needed service to their communities and to travellers, the sale of their high-quality ale also brought in significant income for the monastery, allowing them to fund their charitable works and maintain their lavish buildings. It's a complex and interesting debate. Were they driven by faith or by a savvy business sense? Or, more likely, was it a harmonious blend of both? The monk turns to you, his eyes twinkling, and hands you a small cup of their brew. It's unlike anything you've had before. The taste is clean, a little sweeter, with a complexity that you can't quite place. It's a testament to the power of knowledge, of careful attention to detail, and of a commitment to quality. The monastic brewery was a kind of scientific lab, a place where the art of brewing was transformed by the rigor of scholarly inquiry. This quiet, cloistered world was the unlikely incubator of some of the best beer in the medieval world, and its influence is still felt today. You take a final sip, a silent salute to the monks who gave their lives not just to prayer, but to the noble and delicious pursuit of a perfect pint. The soothing, monastic calm is quickly replaced by the rough and tumble reality of a medieval night out. You find yourself back on the muddy path, the moon now just a sliver in the sky, and the ale has gone straight to your head. You're not just a little tipsy, you're properly drunk. And this is where you encounter a harsh, mainstream historical fact. The dangers of a drunken stupor were very, very real. The medieval world was not a safe place, especially at night. There were no streetlights, no police patrols, and the dark was filled with real, tangible threats. You stumble as you walk, your footing unsteady on the uneven ground. The path that was so easy to navigate on the way to the tavern is now a confusing, treacherous obstacle course. You're a target, a thief or a brigand, lurking in the shadows, would see you as an easy mark. Your wallet and any valuables you might have a simple prize to take. Worse, you could be mistaken for a wandering stranger, an intruder in the wrong place at the wrong time, and find yourself on the receiving end of a suspicious villager's pitchfork. The lack of reliable light made the nights truly dark, a blanket of shadow that hid all manner of dangers. You recall a quirky tidbit you once heard about town watches. They were often made up of local volunteers who were more likely to be drunk themselves than to be a source of law and order, a classic case of the fox guarding the henhouse, or in this case, the drunk guarding the drunk. Beyond the threat of other people, there were the very real dangers of the environment itself. A simple fall could be disastrous. You could land awkwardly and break a bone, a life-threatening injury in an era without modern medicine. A nearby ditch, unseen in the inky blackness, could be a watery grave if you were to fall in and couldn't get yourself out. The cold, too, was a constant threat. In the winter, a drunken stupor could easily turn to hypothermia. As your body loses heat more quickly when you're inebriated, you can feel a chill setting in now, despite the warmth of the ale, a subtle but present reminder of your vulnerability. Historians still argue whether medieval people were more or less tolerant of public drunkenness than we are today. On one hand, it was a common part of daily life, almost an expected consequence of the ubiquitous nature of ale. On the other hand, the legal system could be harsh. A drunken brawl could lead to a fine or a stint in the stocks, and a truly egregious act could result in a much harsher punishment. There was a fine line between a harmless bit of fun and a dangerous transgression, and it was a line you were far more likely to cross when you were a little bit out of your mind. You find yourself leaning against a rough stone wall, your head swimming. The sounds of the night, the rustle of a mouse in the hedge, the distant hoot of an owl, the howl of a dog, all sound amplified, warped by the alcohol. The warm camaraderie of the tavern has faded, leaving you alone in the cold, unforgiving darkness. You realize that getting wasted in the Middle Ages was a luxury that could come at a very steep price. It was an act of both celebration and defiance, a temporary escape from the realities of life that carried its own, very serious risks. You take a deep, shaky breath, and you push yourself away from the wall, determined to make it home, one slow, deliberate step at a time, a living testament to the dangers of a night of medieval revelry. You've made it back to the warmth of your cottage. The fear of the night fading with every breath you take, but the memories of the tavern and the tastes of the night linger. And as you think back, a new detail comes to mind: the role of spices. This is a crucial, mainstream historical fact. Spices were not just for food, they were a key ingredient in medieval drinks. As you recall the aromas, you realize the mead had a complex, rich sweetness, and the ale had a hint of something more than just malt and yeast. This was the work of spices, a way to transform a simple beverage into something more special and, importantly, to help preserve it. Spices like cinnamon, cloves, ginger, nutmeg, and long pepper were a sign of wealth and luxury. They were imported from distant lands along perilous trade routes, making them incredibly expensive. Because of this, their presence in a drink was a statement of status. The richer the person, the more exotic the spices in their mead or wine. A quirky tidbit is that people often drank spiced wine, known as hippocras, which was believed to have medicinal properties and was a popular digestive aid after a heavy feast. The wine was filtered through a cloth bag of spices, which was often called a manicula hippocratis, or Hippocrates' sleeve. This was another way to make a drink more palatable and, in some cases, to mask the taste of a brew that had gone slightly sour. Historians still argue whether spices were used primarily for flavor, for preservation, or for their supposed medicinal benefits. The truth is likely a combination of all three. Spices certainly made drinks more interesting and delicious. They also helped to inhibit bacterial growth, making the drink last longer, a crucial consideration in a world without refrigeration. And many spices were believed to have therapeutic properties, from settling a queasy stomach to warming the body in winter. So, a drink wasn't just a simple beverage, it was a kind of herbal concoction, a flavorful medicine that served a multitude of purposes. You can almost taste it now, the subtle burn of the ginger, the sweet warmth of the cinnamon, a ghost of the past on your tongue. You close your eyes and imagine the alewife, Agnes, at her cauldron, carefully dropping a handful of precious, fragrant herbs into her brew, a special batch for a special occasion. She doesn't just toss them in, she uses her intuition, her knowledge passed down through generations, to get the balance just right. The use of spices was a part of the brewer's art, a way to distinguish their product from others. It made a simple drink something to be savoured, something to be talked about. The next time you find yourself at a modern bar and see a spiced cocktail or a flavoured beer, you can now appreciate the long, storied history of that tradition. It started with medieval brewers, who were not just making drinks but crafting experiences, infusing their brews with a touch of the exotic, a whisper of a distant land. You fall asleep thinking about the trade routes, the caravans, and the ships that brought these tiny, powerful morsels of flavour from across the world. All for the simple pleasure of a spiced drink on a cold night, the warm, spiced memory of a drink quickly gives way to a colder, more sombre reality. The free-for-all of the tavern, while a welcome escape, was not a system without its critics. This leads to a crucial, mainstream historical fact. Authorities often tried to control public drunkenness through laws. These were part of a broader set of regulations known as sumptuary laws, which governed everything from what people could wear to what they could eat and, crucially, what they could drink. The idea was to maintain social order and to prevent excess and sin. You can almost see a stern-faced town crier, parchment in hand, reading a list of new rules to a small, sullen crowd. These laws were an attempt to draw a line between a harmless drink and a dangerous, unruly state of intoxication. They were often put in place by church leaders and city officials who believed that public drunkenness led to a host of other problems, from brawls and street violence to more serious crimes. A quirky tidbit about these laws is that they were often not strictly enforced, especially in rural areas. It was more of a moral guideline than a hard and fast rule, a warning to the populace that while a drink was fine, a drunken stupor was not. The effectiveness of these laws is a point of contention among historians. Historians still argue whether sumptuary laws were truly about morality or if they were a way for the ruling class to maintain their social and economic dominance by preventing the lower classes from emulating their excesses. You can imagine the scene in the village after such a law was passed. People would still drink, but perhaps a little more discreetly. The loud laughter might be a bit more subdued. The boisterous games a little quieter. The alewife, Agnes, might have to be more careful about how much she served to a known troublemaker. The laws were a kind of low-level hum of anxiety in the background of a night out. A reminder that the fun could be curtailed at any moment. They were a reflection of the constant tension in medieval society between the desire for freedom and the need for order. The punishments for breaking these laws could be severe, but they were often more embarrassing than physically harmful. Being put in the stocks or the pillory for public intoxication was a common punishment. This was a form of social shaming, a way to make an example of the offender for the entire village to see. It was a powerful deterrent, as the loss of face in a small, tight-knit community could be a fate worse than a fine. You can almost feel the cold wood of the pillory around your neck. The jeers of your neighbours a constant, humiliating reminder of your transgression. These laws show us a different side of medieval drinking culture, one that was not always a celebration of freedom but was also a constant struggle for control. They highlight the paradox of the time, a world where ale was a life-sustaining necessity, and yet its misuse was considered a serious social ill. It's a reminder that even in an era of apparent wild abandon, there were always rules, spoken and unspoken, that governed how people lived, drank, and behaved. You fall into a restless sleep, dreaming of rules and regulations, the cheerful clatter of the tavern replaced by the low, murmuring whispers of 1,000 unwritten laws. As the sun rises and you finally drift off to sleep, your dreams transport you to a new scene. A comparison between two different worlds, the village and the bustling city. This is a mainstream historical fact. The culture of getting wasted was different in town versus country. The ale you drank in the village tavern was a local, communal affair, a simple, homemade brew that everyone from the farmer to the blacksmith shared. The pace of life was slower, the social circles were smaller, and the drinking was a part of a daily, predictable ritual in a city like London or Paris. However, the drinking culture was a far more diverse and chaotic affair. You imagine yourself now in a packed, smoky urban alehouse, the sounds and smells far more intense than in your quiet village. The variety of drinks is staggering. You can still get the local ale, of course, but you can also find imported wines and more exotic spiced beverages. The people are a different mix as well, not just the local miller and blacksmith, but sailors from foreign lands, wealthy merchants, travelling scholars, and a whole cast of urban characters you'd never encounter in the country. This is a crucial difference. The city was a hub of global trade and a melting pot of cultures, and the drinking establishments reflected that. A quirky tidbit is that in some cities, there were specific taverns that catered to certain trades or nationalities. You might find a tavern where only French merchants drank, or a pub where a particular guild held its meetings. It was a way for people to find a sense of community in the anonymous, overwhelming landscape of the city. Historians still argue whether the increased anonymity of the city led to more or less public drunkenness. On one hand, you were less likely to be shamed by your neighbours if you stumbled home in a drunken stupor. On the other hand, the law and order in a city was often more formal and more strictly enforced than in a rural village, where community pressure and social standing were more powerful deterrents. You can feel the difference now. In the village, your drinking was an act of belonging, a reinforcement of social bonds. In the city, it's a form of escapism, a way to find a brief moment of connection in a sea of strangers. The games are more aggressive, the music is louder, and the conversations are more intense. The very purpose of drinking seems to have shifted from one of sustenance and community to one of pure, unadulterated revelry. You see a man selling something from a tray, a small clay jug of something that smells like a strong liquor. This is another city specialty, a distilled spirit, a precursor to the whiskey and brandy of today. This kind of drink was a rarity in the countryside, but in the city, the demand for stronger, more powerful drinks was always present. The city's drinking culture was also more commercial. The alehouses were bigger, run by professional publicans, and the quality of the brew was more variable. Some places were clean and respectable, while others were little more than dives where you'd be wise to keep one hand on your purse. It was a more dangerous, more exciting, and more anonymous way to get wasted. You close your eyes and feel the sheer sensory overload of the city. The shouts, the smells, the endless parade of strangers. It makes you long for the simple, familiar comfort of your village tavern, a place where everyone knows your name and the alewife's brew is always a known quantity. The city's chaos fades away, and a new, more immediate reality replaces it. You awaken in your own bed, your head pounding, your mouth dry, and the world spinning just a little bit. This is the morning after, and you're experiencing a medieval hangover, a universal human condition, and a mainstream historical fact. The feeling is terrible. The loud clang of a nearby blacksmith's hammer feels like a personal assault on your skull. The bright light streaming in from the small window seems impossibly harsh. You wonder, what did a medieval person do to deal with this feeling? The answer is a quirky tidbit of historical trivia. They had their own set of strange remedies. You might try to eat a concoction of raw eel and ground bitter almonds, a remedy suggested in a 14th century medical text. The thought of it makes your stomach churn even more, or perhaps a more palatable option, a broth made from sheep's head and cabbage, a classic restorative that was believed to settle the stomach and replenish lost fluids. The logic, as you now know, was not always sound, but the intention was good. Another popular cure was to drink more of the same ale that caused the hangover in the first place. A hair of the dog approach that likely offered temporary relief but postponed the inevitable. It's a bit like trying to put out a fire with a slightly different kind of fire. Historians still argue whether these remedies were rooted in any kind of real medicinal knowledge or if they were just folk remedies passed down through generations. Their effectiveness a matter of faith and circumstance. The truth is, without a modern understanding of dehydration and alcohol's effects on the body, the cures were all a bit of a shot in the dark. The primary goal was to make the person feel better, even if only for a short time, to get them back on their feet and back to work. A day of lost labour was a day of lost wages and lost sustenance, a serious consequence in a world where every hand was needed. You groan and roll over, trying to find a position that doesn't make the room spin. The memory of the previous night is a blurry tapestry of laughter, music, and the clatter of tankards. Was it worth it? For a few hours of escape from the drudgery of life? Perhaps. But the price you're paying now feels steep. The medieval hangover wasn't just a physical affliction, it was a kind of moral reckoning. A quiet moment of regret and a silent vow to never drink again. A vow that, like all such vows, would likely be forgotten by the time the sun began to set. You slowly, painstakingly, sit up. The world rights itself with a slow, agonizing tilt. You feel a familiar, uncomfortable ache in your muscles from the physical exertion of a long day of labor, an ache that is now compounded by the foggy confusion of the hangover. The reality of your life, the hard work, the simple, demanding existence, rushes back in. The magical, carefree world of the tavern is gone, replaced by the grim reality of a new day. You realize that the hangover wasn't just a consequence of drinking, it was a way of bringing you back to earth. A painful but necessary transition from the world of revelry to the world of responsibility. You drag yourself out of bed, your body a collection of aches and pains, and you begin the long, slow process of facing the day. You've survived the hangover and are back on your feet, but you're still not quite ready for another boisterous night at the tavern. Instead, you find yourself drawn to a different kind of drinking tradition, one that is both solemn and celebratory. This is the wassail, and it's a mainstream historical fact that this ritual was deeply tied to agriculture and the seasons. You see a group of villagers gathering in a nearby apple orchard, their faces ruddy from the cold air, their breath hanging in the frigid twilight. They are carrying torches and small wooden bowls, and you can smell the rich aroma of spiced ale. The purpose of the wassail, you learn, is to bless the apple trees and ward off evil spirits to ensure a bountiful harvest in the coming year. It's a blend of pagan traditions and Christian beliefs, a unique and fascinating cultural practice. A large bowl, the wassail bowl, is passed from person to person. It is filled with a hot, spiced ale, often mixed with roasted apples, sugar, and spices. A quirky tidbit is that the word wassail comes from the Old English phrase was heil, which means be well or be in good health. The response to the toast was drink heil, or drink well. It was a simple exchange of good wishes, a beautiful and ancient way of communicating hope and goodwill. The villagers sing a series of raucous, rhythmic songs, their voices echoing through the bare branches of the trees. They pour a small amount of the spiced ale at the base of the tree. A kind of offering to the spirits of the orchard, they then hang pieces of toast soaked in the wassail on the branches. A kind of tasty lure for the birds and good spirits. The air is filled with the scent of hot spices and the sound of joyous, slightly tipsy singing. It's a form of communal drinking that is worlds away from the drunken revelry of the tavern. It's purposeful, meaningful, and deeply connected to the rhythm of life and death, of sowing and reaping. Historians still argue whether the wassail was a truly ancient tradition or a later invention designed to bring a sense of continuity and comfort to a world that was constantly changing. Was it a genuine, heartfelt ritual or a bit of manufactured folklore? The answer is probably a mix of both. It's a testament to the human need to find meaning and ritual in the simple things, to create a sense of control in a world that often felt chaotic and unpredictable. The act of sharing a drink was a way of reinforcing social bonds, of reaffirming a shared identity, and of communicating a collective hope for the future. You take a bowl from a neighbour, the hot liquid warming your hands, and you take a slow, appreciative sip. The taste is sweet, spicy, and a little bit earthy, the flavour of hope and community. You feel a sense of belonging that is different from the boisterous camaraderie of the tavern. This is a quieter, more profound kind of connection, a shared moment of faith in the land and in each other. You feel the magic of the moment, the sense that you're a part of something much bigger and older than yourself, a living link in a chain that stretches back for centuries. The wind blows through the trees, a cold breath of winter, but you feel warm and safe in the circle of your neighbours. You pass the bowl to the person next to you, a silent wish for their health and for the good of the community. The solemnity of the wassail fades, and you're back in the tavern, but the atmosphere has changed. The simple hum of conversation has given way to a richer, more melodic sound. A travelling minstrel has returned, and this is a crucial, mainstream historical fact. Music and minstrels were a vital part of the medieval drinking experience. They didn't just provide entertainment, they amplified the atmosphere, turning a simple night out into a full-blown event. The minstrel you see now, with his lute slung over his shoulder, is a professional entertainer, a storyteller, and a news-bringer all in one. He takes a seat by the fire, a mug of ale placed in front of him, and begins to play. The songs he sings are varied, a mix of heroic ballads, bawdy drinking songs, and melancholy tales of lost love. The music fills the smoky room, and the patrons, who were just a moment ago engaged in their own conversations and games, fall silent, listening intently. The minstrel's songs are not just for enjoyment, they are a way to transport the listener, to give them a brief escape from the monotony of their daily lives. A quirky tidbit about minstrels is that they often improvised their songs, weaving in local gossip and current events to make them more relevant to their audience. Imagine a modern-day comedian, but with a lute, and a knack for turning your neighbour's unfortunate run-in with a goose into a hilarious epic. The minstrel's presence also added a layer of respectability to the tavern. While it was a place for rowdy fun, it was also a place for art and culture, a communal gathering space for more than just getting drunk. Historians still argue whether the tavern's reputation as a den of iniquity was deserved or if it was more of a moral panic, a way for the powerful to control the behaviour of the lower classes. The presence of minstrels and storytellers suggests that the tavern was a more complex and nuanced institution than its reputation would suggest. It was a place for both carousing and for cultural enrichment, a kind of community centre that provided a little bit of everything. You watch as the minstrel's fingers fly over the strings of his lute, a simple but beautiful melody filling the air. He sings a song about a night's journey, his voice clear and strong. The patrons are captivated, lost in the story. This is the power of music, a power that transcends language and social class. For a few moments, the lord and the peasant, the merchant and the farmer, are all equal, all united by a single, shared experience. The minstrel's songs were a way of preserving history, of passing down stories and legends from one generation to the next. They were the newspapers, the television, and the internet of their day, and the tavern was the perfect stage for them to perform. As the minstrel finishes a song, a wave of applause and cheers washes over him. A few coins are tossed onto the table. A small but generous reward for his talent. He takes a long drink of his ale, a satisfied smile on his face, and begins to tune his lute for the next song. The music has amplified the warmth and camaraderie of the room, making the ale taste a little bit better, the fire feel a little bit warmer, and the world feel a little bit more hopeful. The tavern, under the spell of the minstrel's music, is not just a place to drink, it's a place to dream, a place to forget, and a place to remember. The minstrel's music fades, and the season begins to change. The air outside the tavern grows colder, the days shorter. This is a crucial, mainstream historical fact. Medieval drinking habits changed with the seasons. The drinks, the rituals, and the atmosphere of the tavern all shifted to reflect the rhythms of the agricultural year. You are no longer in the warm, languid days of summer, but in the crisp, cold embrace of autumn and the deep chill of winter. In the summer, you would have found yourself drinking lighter, weaker ales, and perhaps even some cider, made from the apples that were so plentiful. The drinking would have been more casual, often done outdoors in the fields after a long day of harvest. It was a time of celebration and abundance, a reflection of the generosity of the land. The drinks were simple, refreshing, and meant to quench a thirst that came from long hours in the sun. A quirky tidbit is that in some regions, a spiced summer ale known as posset was popular. It was made from hot milk curdled with ale or wine and often sweetened with sugar and spices. It was considered a restorative and was even prescribed for various ailments, a kind of proto-cocktail that was both a dessert and a medicine. Now, as the weather turns, the drinking becomes more focused on warmth and sustenance. The ale you're drinking now is likely thicker and darker, brewed with a higher malt content to provide more calories and a heavier, more comforting body. You see a large pot over the fire, and you catch the scent of simmering spices and mulled wine. This is a winter staple, a way to warm the body from the inside out and to make an old wine palatable. The tavern itself becomes even more of a refuge, a sanctuary from the biting cold and the long, dark nights. The people huddle closer together, the conversation becomes more intimate, and the games are played with a quiet intensity. The atmosphere is less about wild abandon and more about survival and comfort. Historians still argue whether the seasonal shift in drinking habits was a matter of practical necessity or a deeper reflection of the medieval psyche. Did they simply drink what was available, or did the changing seasons influence their moods, making them crave heartier drinks in winter and lighter ones in summer? The answer is likely a bit of both. The natural cycle of the seasons dictated what was available to brew, but the human desire for comfort and celebration also played a huge role. The winter solstice and Christmas were times of great feasting and heavy drinking, a way to chase away the darkness and to reaffirm life in the face of death. You can feel the change in the air, a sense of quiet anticipation for the long, cold season ahead, but also a sense of comfort in the warm, familiar rituals of the tavern. The ale in your hand feels heavier and more comforting, a perfect companion for the cold night outside. The season changes again, but this time, the shift is not natural. A profound, terrifying shadow falls over the world, and you feel the weight of a monumental, the mainstream historical fact, the impact of the Black Death, the plague, which swept across Europe in the mid-14th century, changed everything, and the drinking habits of the people were no exception. The cheerful clatter of the tavern is now replaced by a somber quiet. The boisterous laughter is gone, replaced by a low, mournful murmur. The plague, a horrifying disease that killed a third or more of the population, had two very different effects on people's attitudes toward life and, by extension, drinking. For some, the omnipresence of death led to a deep, despairing turn towards religion and asceticism. They saw the plague as God's punishment and believed that a life of piety and sobriety was the only way to seek redemption. You see a man at a table, his hands clasped in prayer, his untouched mug of ale, a testament to his newfound devotion. This was a direct rejection of the carefree revelry that defined the pre-plague era. But for others, the opposite was true. A quirky tidbit is that the plague also led to a carpe diem attitude, a seize the day philosophy. With death lurking around every corner, some people decided to live life to the fullest, to enjoy every moment as if it were their last. The taverns in some cities became even more raucous, as people drank to forget their fear and to celebrate the simple fact that they were still alive. They would spend their money, eat their fill, and drink themselves into a state of blissful oblivion, a kind of temporary escape from a world that seemed to be ending. Historians still argue whether this was a true embrace of nihilism or a desperate search for meaning in a world that had lost its way. Was it a rebellion against death or a surrender to it? The answer is likely both. A reflection of the deep and conflicting emotions that the plague stirred in the human heart. The alewife, Agnes, is still there, but her face is tired and lined with grief. She has lost family and friends, and her business has been affected by the deaths of her customers. The economy of the village has been thrown into chaos, but she still brews her ale, a quiet, stubborn act of continuity in a world that has been turned upside down. The ale is a kind of anchor, a constant in a sea of change. It provides comfort, sustenance, and a brief moment of normalcy in an era that is anything but normal. You feel the atmosphere in the tavern now, a mix of quiet grief and frenzied celebration. A group of men, their faces flushed with ale, raise their mugs in a boisterous toast to the living, their voices a little too loud, a little too strained. A woman in a dark shawl weeps quietly in the corner, her body racked with sobs. It's a stark and powerful contrast, a living illustration of the human response to unimaginable tragedy. The ale, which was once a simple, uncomplicated pleasure, has now become a vessel for a whole new range of emotions. It's a drink of mourning and a drink of defiant celebration, a testament to the fact that even in the darkest of times, people will still find a way to come together, to find solace, and to drink. The somber weight of the plague begins to lift, and the tavern fills with a mix of quiet resilience and renewed hope. You are drawn into a different kind of ritual, one that is as old as the ale itself. This is the art of the medieval toast, and it's a mainstream historical fact that these simple gestures were rich with superstition and meaning. You watch as a man stands, his face flushed with drink, and raises his tankard high. He shouts, "To the king," and takes a long, loud gulp. His friends follow suit, and the sound of clinking pottery and wood echoes through the room, a kind of percussive chorus. These toasts were not just for celebration, they were a way of cementing loyalty, of warding off bad luck, and of communicating a wide range of emotions without having to say too much. A toast could be a political statement, a promise to a friend, or a simple wish for good health. A quirky tidbit about medieval toasts is the phrase, "drink to the dead." In some regions, it was customary to make a toast in honor of a recently deceased person. This was not a somber, mournful ritual, but a way of celebrating their life and ensuring their memory lived on in the community. It was a kind of defiance in the face of death, a way of saying that even in the grave, your spirit would be remembered and honored. The toasts were also a way of dealing with the fear of the unknown. People in the Middle Ages lived in a world full of unseen forces, spirits, demons, and mischievous fairies. They believed that a toast, a loud noise, and a swift gulp could ward off these malevolent beings and protect them from harm. You can almost feel the superstitious energy in the room, the sense that every toast is a small act of magic, a kind of verbal spell to ensure good fortune. Historians still argue whether these superstitions were genuine beliefs or simply a convenient excuse for drinking more ale. The truth is likely a combination of both. In a world that felt both magical and terrifying, a little bit of ritual and superstition went a long way toward providing a sense of comfort and control. You raise your own tankard now, a feeling of camaraderie washing over you. You don't know the words, but you understand the gesture. A man across the table sees you, smiles, and raises his own mug. He shouts, "To good fortune," and you echo him. A new member of this small, temporary community. The taste of the ale is a little different now, imbued with a sense of purpose and meaning. It's not just a drink, it's a social contract, a promise, and a shield against the darkness. The toasts continue, a rhythmic, unending ritual that binds the people together. It's a kind of non-verbal language, a way for people to say what they can't express in words. You feel the simple, comforting power of it, a timeless gesture that has survived centuries of change and still holds a place in the human heart. The loud toasts and boisterous revelry of the tavern stand in stark contrast to the quiet rumblings of a small, but persistent, movement. You are now witnessing a crucial, mainstream historical fact. the early roots of the temperance movement. While the idea of total abstinence from alcohol was a long way off, there were voices in the Middle Ages who advocated for moderation and even sobriety. This wasn't a widespread movement, but it existed in pockets, often within the church or among scholarly elites. They viewed drunkenness not as a simple indulgence, but as a moral failing and a source of social disorder. You might hear a friar preaching a sermon in the town square, his voice filled with passion as he decries the evils of overindulgence. He would speak of the sin of gluttony, the loss of reason, and the violence and chaos that came with a drunken stupor. For these early moralists, the tavern was not a place of community, but a den of iniquity. They saw alcohol as a dangerous substance that led people astray, and they advocated for a more disciplined and sober life. A quirky tidbit is that some of these early temperance advocates would publish pamphlets or poems with titles like The ABC of Drunkards to warn people of the dangers of excessive drinking. These works were often filled with vivid and gruesome descriptions of the punishments that awaited the inebriated in this life and the next. Historians still argue whether these early temperance movements had any real impact on the behavior of the general populace. The widespread consumption of ale and wine suggests that they were largely unsuccessful, but their existence tells us something important about the medieval mindset. It reveals a deep and persistent tension between the carefree abandon of the tavern and the moral and religious strictures of the time. It was a society that recognized the dangers of alcohol, even as it relied on it for sustenance and social bonding. The temperance advocates, for all their lack of success, were a kind of moral compass, a reminder that the wild, drunken nights came with a price. You see a man in the corner of the tavern, a lone figure nursing a small cup of water. He is not a hermit or a monk, but a simple peasant who has taken a vow of sobriety, perhaps in penance for a past sin or as a way to live a more disciplined life. He sits quietly, listening to the boisterous conversation and the minstrel's music, a silent but powerful testament to the fact that there was an alternative to the drinking culture that surrounded him. His presence is a kind of gentle reproach, a reminder that the path of moderation, while not popular, was always an option. The air in the tavern, which once felt so thick with freedom and revelry, now feels a little more complex. You're more aware of the moral debates and the social anxieties that underpin this world. The ale in your hand is not just a drink, it's a moral and social statement. It's a symbol of both community and chaos, of both sustenance and sin. You take a sip, and you taste not just the malty sweetness, but a long history of human beings grappling with the powerful and contradictory nature of alcohol. It's a sobering thought, a quiet moment of reflection in the middle of a loud and joyful night. The moralizing tone of the temperance movement fades, and you are back in the bustling city, where a different kind of social order governs the drinking world. You find yourself in a large, communal hall, and this is a crucial, mainstream historical fact. Guilds had their own beer halls and drinking cultures. The guild was a powerful force in medieval society, a combination of a trade union, a professional association, and a social club. Each guild, whether it was for weavers, blacksmiths, or goldsmiths, had its own hall, its own rules, and its own traditions, many of which revolved around drinking. You watch as a group of master tailors gathers at a long, heavy table, their mugs of ale in hand. The atmosphere is different from the public tavern. It is more formal, more structured. The conversation is not just idle chatter, it is about business, about the price of wool, and about the quality of their work. The ale is a part of this professional discourse, a way to seal a deal or to settle a dispute. A quirky tidbit is that some guilds had very strict rules about how much a person could drink. Fines were levied for excessive drunkenness, and a member could even be expelled for persistent misbehavior. The guild's reputation was paramount, and a drunken, disorderly member was a liability. It was a kind of self-policing that was far more effective than the sumptuary laws of the government. Historians still argue whether the guild beer halls were a true expression of brotherhood or a way for the masters to control the apprentices and journeymen. While they did provide a space for camaraderie and social support, they also reinforced the strict social hierarchy of the guild system. The master would sit at the head of the table, and the apprentices would be at the bottom, their mugs filled only after the masters had been served. It was a subtle but powerful way of communicating the power structure of the guild. You can see the young apprentice, his eyes wide with a mix of awe and fear, waiting patiently for his turn to drink. The guild hall was also a place for celebration. You can imagine the annual feast, a time of great feasting and even heavier drinking, a time for the guild to celebrate its successes and to welcome new members. These events were a way of reinforcing the guild's identity and its importance to the city. The ale was not just a drink, it was a symbol of their shared identity, a kind of liquid badge of honor. You see a man, a master blacksmith, raising his mug in a toast to the new apprentice, his face filled with pride. The gesture is both a welcome and a challenge, a silent promise to teach the young man the trade and a silent demand that he live up to the guild's standards. You feel the weight of this tradition, the sense of history and purpose that fills the hall. This is not the wild, chaotic world of the public tavern. It is a world of order, of rules, and of a shared sense of purpose. The ale is a part of that order, a way to lubricate the gears of commerce and community. You take a sip of your ale, a silent toast to the thousands of artisans and craftsmen who have gathered in similar halls for centuries, their lives and their livelihoods bound together by a simple mug of beer. It's a sobering thought, a reminder that even in the world of drinking, there were strict rules and a deep sense of purpose. The structured world of the guild hall gives way to a new, more complex setting. You are now in the midst of a heated debate, and you feel the full weight of a crucial mainstream historical fact. The church had a complex and often contradictory stance on alcohol. On one hand, the church saw alcohol as a gift from God. Wine, in particular, was an essential part of the sacrament of communion, a symbol of Christ's blood. Monasteries, as you remember, were centers of brewing and winemaking, and monks were some of the most skilled producers of alcohol in the Middle Ages. The Bible itself contains passages that speak favorably of wine, with figures like the Apostle Paul recommending a little wine for the stomach's sake. But on the other hand, the church was a vocal critic of drunkenness. They saw it as a sin, a form of gluttony, and a pathway to other, more serious transgressions. You might hear a priest giving a sermon on the dangers of overindulgence, his voice filled with righteous anger. He would speak of the loss of reason, the public disorder, and the moral corruption that came with a drunken stupor. It was a confusing and often contradictory message. A quirky tidbit is that some priests and moralists used a kind of personification, creating a figure like Lord Overdrink to represent the evils of alcohol. This was a way of making the abstract concept of drunkenness more tangible and easier to condemn. Historians still argue whether the church's contradictory stance on alcohol was a sign of hypocrisy or a reflection of a genuine and complex moral dilemma. Was it a way for the church to have it both ways? To condemn the excess while profiting from the production of alcohol? Or was it a more subtle understanding of human nature, a recognition that a substance could be both a blessing and a curse? The answer is likely a bit of both. The church, like any large institution, had a variety of views, and its stance on alcohol was a reflection of the conflicting forces of commerce, morality, and tradition. You can see the monks brewing their ale with a sense of piety, and at the same time, you can imagine a priest, a mug of wine in his hand, preaching against the evils of drunkenness. The paradox of the church's stance on alcohol is a fascinating window into the medieval mind. It shows us a world that was grappling with a fundamental question: where do you draw the line between a good thing and a bad thing? When does a drink for sustenance become a sin of excess? The answer, as you can see, was not always clear. The ale in your hand is not just a simple beverage, it's a part of a long and complicated history of theological debate and moral struggle. You take a sip, and you taste the contradiction. The long history of a society that saw the same liquid as both a gift from God and a tool of the devil. It's a powerful and thought-provoking sip, a reminder that nothing in the medieval world was ever as simple as it seemed. You're back in the familiar, noisy tavern, but you're now seeing it through a new lens, one focused on the economic realities of the time. This is a crucial, mainstream historical fact. The price of a pint was regulated, and the alewife was subject to strict rules. The local authorities, often the lord of the manor or the town council, would set a statute price for a gallon of ale, and the alewife was not allowed to charge more than that. This was a form of consumer protection, a way to ensure that the common people were not being ripped off. You can imagine a stern-faced official, perhaps even the bailiff you saw earlier, coming into the tavern to inspect the quality of the brew and to check the prices. But the real threat to the alewife wasn't just a high price, it was a weak brew. The laws were very specific about the quality of the ale. An unscrupulous brewer could be punished for adulterating their product, which meant watering it down or adding cheap, non-traditional ingredients. The punishment for such a crime could be severe, ranging from a hefty fine to being put in the pillory, a kind of public shaming that would ruin a person's reputation. A quirky tidbit about this is that the ale taster, a person who we will learn about more later, would sometimes be required to wear special leather breeches and to spill a bit of ale on a bench. If the ale was too sweet, they would literally stick to the bench. It was a primitive but effective way to test the quality of the brew, a kind of medieval quality control. Historians still argue whether these regulations were truly about protecting the consumer or a way for the ruling class to control the economy and to ensure a steady stream of taxes. While they did provide a form of protection, they also limited the alewife's ability to make a profit and to innovate. It was a kind of a double-edged sword, a system that provided security but also limited freedom. The alewife, Agnes, is a business owner, but she is a business owner with very little autonomy. She must operate within a rigid and unforgiving system, one that demands consistency and honesty. You watch as a man hands her a small coin, and she fills his tankard to the brim, the foam spilling over the sides. The exchange is simple and honest, a reflection of the trust that exists between the brewer and the consumer. The regulations, for all their limitations, created a system where that trust was a given. You knew that the ale you were drinking was, for the most part, a good and honest brew. It was a simple transaction, but it was one that was underpinned by a whole network of laws, regulations, and social contracts. The ale in your hand is not just a drink, it's a testament to a long and complicated history of business and regulation. You take a sip, and you taste not just the malty goodness, but the bitter taste of government oversight and the sweet reward of a fair price. It's a taste of the real, unvarnished history of medieval commerce. The economics of the tavern fade, and you are back to its social purpose, a place that was far more than a simple drinking establishment. This is a crucial, mainstream historical fact. The tavern was the primary news hub of the medieval world. In an era without newspapers, radio, or the internet, news and information travelled by word of mouth, and the tavern was the most important relay station. You can almost feel the energy in the room, the low hum of gossip and rumours, a kind of invisible current of information that binds the community together. You watch as a travelling merchant, his face etched with the lines of the road, takes a seat by the fire. He is immediately surrounded by a group of men, eager to hear what he has to say. He speaks of a great battle that was fought in a distant land, of a new law that has been passed by the king, and of the price of grain in the next town over. The information he provides is not just for curiosity, it is for survival. A farmer needs to know the price of grain, a merchant needs to know about a new law, and a soldier needs to know about a war. The tavern, with its constant flow of travellers and its captive audience, was the perfect place for this kind of information exchange. A quirky tidbit is that the term inn or tavern was sometimes used to describe a place where people interchange information. It's an etymological link that highlights the tavern's crucial role as a social hub. Historians still argue whether the information passed in the tavern was more or less reliable than the official pronouncements from the church or the king. The gossip and rumours that spread through the tavern were often wildly inaccurate, but they were also a source of truth that was often more trusted than the official word. People were more likely to believe a story from a travelling merchant, a person they could see and talk to, than a written proclamation from a distant king. The tavern was a place where people could not only get information, but also debate its validity. A kind of precursor to the modern-day town hall. You're a part of it now, listening intently as the merchant speaks. You can feel the sense of urgency in the room, the need for information in a world that felt both vast and unknown. The tavern is a kind of communal brain, a place where the knowledge and experience of the entire community are collected and disseminated. The ale, which you so eagerly consume, is not just a drink, it's a social lubricant, a way to open up the channels of communication and to get people talking. The more they drink, the more they talk, and the more information that flows. You take a sip of your ale, a silent toast to the power of a good story and a good drink to bring people together. The tavern, you realize, is not just a place for getting wasted, it's a place for getting informed. It is a living, breathing network of information, a vital part of the medieval world that we are only just beginning to understand. The tavern, as a hub of information, is a far cry from its next role, a much quieter and more solemn one. You are now seeing a crucial, mainstream historical fact. Alcoholic concoctions were often used for medicinal purposes. In a world without modern medicine, people turned to whatever they had on hand to treat ailments. And that often meant a drink. Alcohol was seen as a powerful agent, a way to dissolve herbs and spices and to deliver their healing properties to the body. You can almost feel the warmth of a mug in your hands, not for pleasure, but for health. You might be given a concoction of spiced wine, known as hippocras, to aid in digestion after a heavy meal, or perhaps a stronger brew, a kind of herbal brandy, to soothe a painful cough. The logic was simple. Alcohol was a strong solvent, and it was believed to extract the essences of the herbs and to make them more potent. A quirky tidbit is that people with a fever would often be given a warm, spiced ale to induce sweating, a process that was believed to purge the body of the illness. It was a kind of primitive but effective way to break a fever, a testament to the ingenuity of the medieval mind. Historians still argue whether these medicinal concoctions were truly effective or if their power was more psychological, a kind of placebo effect. While some of the herbs used did have real medicinal properties, the lack of sterile conditions and scientific knowledge meant that the cures were often hit or miss, but the belief in their power was strong, and that belief in itself could have a powerful effect on the patient's well-being. The ale in your hand is not just a drink, it's a kind of medicine, a last resort in a world where disease and death were constant companions. You can feel the warmth of the spice and the faint, bitter taste of the herbs, a flavor that is both comforting and a little bit unsettling. It's a reminder that the line between a remedy and a poison was often a very fine one. You recall the earlier image of the drunken stupor, the dangers of a night out. And now you see the other side of the coin. Alcohol was not just a source of chaos and danger, it was also a tool for healing and a comfort in times of illness. It was a substance with a dual nature, a kind of liquid paradox. It could both harm and heal, both corrupt and console. The ale in your hand, you realize, is a testament to this duality, a liquid that has been used for every human purpose, from the most celebratory to the most somber. You take a sip, and you taste a long history of human beings grappling with the powerful and contradictory nature of a single substance. It's a powerful and thought-provoking sip, a reminder that nothing in the medieval world was ever as simple as it seemed. The medicinal qualities of ale fade, and a new, more subtle change is taking place. You are witnessing a major mainstream historical fact, the transition from ale to beer. For most of the Middle Ages, the drink of choice was ale, a brew made from water, malt, and yeast, with a mixture of herbs known as gruit for flavouring. It was a thick, sweet, and quickly perishable drink. But as you watch, you see a change happening in the brewing process. A new ingredient, a small, unassuming green flower, is being added to the brew. This is the hop, and its introduction changed the world of drinking forever. The hop was a game changer. It not only added a bitter, more refreshing flavour to the brew, but it also acted as a powerful preservative. A quirky tidbit is that the term hoppy was originally a way of describing a drink that had been brewed with hops, a word that would later be used to describe the flavour of a modern beer. Before hops, ale would go sour within a few days, which meant it had to be consumed quickly. With hops, a brewer could create a drink that would last for months, even on a long sea voyage. This had a profound effect on trade and commerce, as brewers could now export their product to distant lands. Historians still argue whether the transition from ale to beer was a matter of taste or a matter of economics. Did people prefer the taste of the new, bitter brew, or did the longer shelf life of beer simply make it a more practical choice for trade and commerce? The truth is likely a bit of both. The new taste was a welcome change, and the new practicality was a huge advantage. The alewife, Agnes, is now a more skilled businesswoman, able to sell her product over a longer period of time and to a wider range of customers. The beer she brews is a little different from the ale you're used to. It's clearer, a little lighter, and has a crisp, refreshing bitterness that is a welcome change from the heavy, bready sweetness of the ale. You take a sip of the new brew, and you can feel the subtle shift. It's not a radical change, but a slow, steady evolution, a testament to the ingenuity and the adaptability of the human race. The transition from ale to beer was not a single event, but a long, slow process that took centuries to complete. It was a revolution that happened one mug at a time. And it was a revolution that changed the world. The beer in your hand is not just a drink, it's a piece of history. A physical link between the past and the present. You take a final, appreciative sip. A silent toast to the quiet innovators who changed the way we drink forever. The new, hopped beer is a delicious innovation, but you turn your attention back to the more ancient of the elite drinks. You're now seeing a crucial, mainstream historical fact. Mead making was a complex and refined art form, while ale was a necessity of daily life. Mead was an expression of skill and sophistication. The process was far more complex than simply fermenting honey and water. It was a delicate dance of ingredients, temperatures, and timing. You can almost smell the sweet, floral aroma of the honey being heated, the air thick with its rich, golden scent. The mead maker, a person of great skill and respect, would carefully select the honey, often from specific hives, to achieve a particular flavor profile. They would then mix it with water and a variety of spices and herbs. This is where a quirky tidbit comes in. Many mead makers would use a blend of herbs known as metheglin, a Welsh term that gives us the word medicine. This was a mead with medicinal properties, a kind of ancient cough syrup or tonic. The mead maker would also add fruits, like cherries or raspberries, to create different kinds of mead, each with its own unique flavor and color. The fermentation process itself was slow and deliberate, often taking months or even years to complete. The longer the mead aged, the more complex its flavor became. Historians still argue whether the mead maker's special status was due to their skill or to the rarity and value of the ingredients they used. Was it the craft or the commodity that made them so respected? The answer is likely a bit of both. The mead maker was not just a brewer, they were a kind of alchemist, a magician who could transform a simple liquid into a powerful and delicious elixir. The mead they produced was a symbol of wealth, power, and prestige, and it was a drink that was reserved for the most special of occasions. You see a mead maker, his hands stained with honey, his face filled with the quiet pride of a true craftsman. The mead he produces is not just a drink, it's a testament to a long and storied history of human ingenuity. You take a sip of a mead that has been offered to you, the sweet, honeyed liquid, a sharp contrast to the earthy ale. You taste a long history of craftsmanship, a deep respect for the ingredients, and a sense of quiet reverence for the art of the brew. The refined world of mead making gives way to a new, more boisterous reality. You're back in the tavern, and the minstrel has returned. But this time, he's not singing of knights and ladies, he's singing drinking songs and boisterous ballads. And this is a crucial, mainstream historical fact. These songs were a vital part of the medieval tavern experience. They were a way for people to express their joy, their humour, and their frustrations in a way that was both communal and cathartic. The songs are loud, off-key, and filled with a kind of unbridled energy that can only come from a night of heavy drinking. The songs are often simple, with repetitive choruses that everyone can join in on. The topics are varied, but they often revolve around the pleasures of drinking, the dangers of love, and the absurdity of daily life. You hear a song about a drunken friar, another about a cheating wife, and a third about a farmer who gets lost in the woods. The songs are filled with gentle sarcasm and a kind of sleepy, relaxed humour that feels right at home in this smoky, fire-lit room. A quirky tidbit is that many of these drinking songs were also used as a kind of coded language, a way for people to express political or social dissent without getting into trouble. A song about a lazy lord or a corrupt priest could be sung in a way that was both humorous and deeply critical. Historians still argue whether these drinking songs were a true expression of the common people's voice, or if they were simply a form of harmless, drunken entertainment. While they were certainly a source of fun, they were also a way for people to voice their opinions and to connect with each other on a deeper level. The songs were a kind of oral history, a way for people to pass down their stories and their values from one generation to the next. They were a powerful and important part of the medieval cultural landscape. You find yourself humming along, your voice joining the chorus of a dozen others, a feeling of deep, uncomplicated joy washing over you. The songs, for all their simplicity, have a powerful effect. They turn a room full of strangers into a temporary choir, a community bound together by a shared love of music and a shared appreciation for a good laugh. You take a final sip of your ale, a silent toast to the power of a good song to bring people together. The boisterous songs of the tavern fade, and you are once again transported to a world of wealth and luxury. You find yourself in the great hall of a magnificent castle, surrounded by the powerful and the privileged. This is a crucial, mainstream historical fact. Royal feasts and elaborate libations were a world away from the common tavern. The drinking here is not just for sustenance or social bonding, it's a performance, a meticulously choreographed display of wealth and power. You watch as a servant pours a ruby-red wine from a golden pitcher into a goblet studded with jewels. The wine is an imported luxury, likely from France or Spain, and its colour and clarity are a testament to its quality and expense. The drinking vessels are also a work of art, made from silver, gold, and crystal, a stark contrast to the rough wooden tankards of the tavern. The drinks themselves are a kind of culinary art, with exotic spices and rare fruits added to create unique and intoxicating concoctions. A quirky tidbit is that some feasts would feature subtleties, which were elaborate sugar sculptures of animals, castles, or even famous people. These were not for eating, but for admiration. A kind of edible art that was a powerful symbol of the host's wealth and extravagance. Historians still argue whether these elaborate feasts were a true expression of royal power or a desperate attempt to impress and to maintain control over a fickle and often rebellious nobility. Were they a genuine celebration or a form of social engineering? The answer is likely a bit of both. The feasts were a way for the king to show his power, his wealth, and his generosity, but they were also a way to secure the loyalty of his subjects, to bind them to him with the invisible chains of good food and free-flowing drink. The atmosphere is different from the tavern. It is more formal, more calculated, and a little less genuine. The laughter is a little too loud, the smiles a little too wide, and the toasts a little too self-serving. You take a sip of the fine wine, and you taste a long history of political intrigue and social manipulation. The wine, for all its quality, tastes a little bit hollow, a little bit fake. It's a reminder that even at the highest levels of society, a drink is never just a drink. The opulence of the royal feast fades, and you're back in the miserable, foggy reality of a hangover. You feel the familiar pounding in your head and the churning in your stomach, and you find yourself returning to the question of remedies. This is a crucial, mainstream historical fact. The hangover cure debate was a long-standing one in the Middle Ages. People had their own set of strange and often ineffective cures, and they were always looking for the next big thing. You imagine yourself now in a small, cramped room, a medieval physician looking you over, his face a mask of solemn concern. He might offer you a remedy that seems absurd to a modern mind, like a concoction of swallows' wings boiled in wine, a cure that was believed to give you the lightness and speed of a bird, or perhaps a more palatable option, a broth made from tripe and onions, a kind of primitive but effective hangover soup. The logic was simple. A good, hearty meal would help to settle the stomach and to replenish lost fluids. A quirky tidbit is that a popular cure was to rub your forehead with a mixture of vinegar and herbs, a kind of primitive balm that was believed to draw out the evil spirits that caused the headache. It sounds a little bit like a magic spell, but in a world without modern medicine, a little bit of magic was often all you had. Historians still argue whether these remedies were a sign of medieval ignorance or a reflection of a deeper, more profound understanding of the human body. While some of the cures were clearly a kind of folk magic, others were surprisingly effective. The tripe and onion soup, for example, would have provided a much-needed dose of salt, protein, and fluids, all of which are essential for a good recovery. The vinegar balm, while not a cure, would have provided a cooling and soothing sensation that would have made the headache more bearable. The truth is likely a bit of both. The medieval person was a pragmatic and clever individual, and they used whatever they had on hand to solve their problems. You groan and roll over, feeling the full weight of the hangover, and you realize that the search for a cure is a timeless one. The desire to find a quick and easy solution to the consequences of a night of fun is a universal human trait. The medieval hangover was not just a physical affliction, it was a kind of moral reckoning. A quiet moment of regret and a silent vow to never drink again, a vow that, as you know, would likely be forgotten by the time the sun began to set. You fall back into a restless sleep, dreaming of a world without pain, a world where the pleasures of a night out never came with a price. The pounding in your head recedes, and you find yourself once again back in the familiar warmth of the village tavern, but you're now seeing it through a new lens, one focused on the role of women. This is a crucial, mainstream historical fact. Women were the primary brewers of ale, and the alewife was a figure of significant economic and social importance. We've already met Agnes, the alewife. But now you see her not just as a server, but as a powerful business owner in a world where women had very few opportunities for financial independence. Her role was not just about brewing, it was about managing a business, dealing with suppliers and customers, and navigating the complex web of regulations that governed the sale of ale. A quirky tidbit is that the image of the witch, with her pointed hat and cauldron, is thought by many historians to be a direct caricature of the alewife. The pointed hat was used to signal a fresh batch of brew, the cauldron was her primary tool, and the cat was often kept as a form of pest control. It was an image that was twisted and weaponized by a patriarchal society that was uncomfortable with a woman's economic power. Historians still argue whether the demonization of the alewife was a deliberate act of misogyny or a more subtle reflection of a society that was uncomfortable with women in positions of power. Was it a way to control their economic independence or a genuine fear of their supposed magical powers? The answer is likely a bit of both. The alewife was a figure of both respect and suspicion, a woman who held a unique and powerful position in the community. You watch as Agnes moves with a sense of purpose and authority. Her voice a calm but firm presence in the noisy room. She is a business owner, a community leader, and a crucial part of the village's social fabric. She is a living testament to the fact that even in a world that was often hostile to women, they found a way to thrive, to build businesses, and to create a place for themselves. You take a sip of her brew, and you taste a long and powerful history of female entrepreneurship. A taste of a world where women held a different kind of power, a power that was brewed one mug at a time. The alewife's entrepreneurial spirit fades, and you're now witnessing a much more profound and deeply personal use of alcohol. This is a crucial, mainstream historical fact. Alcohol was used in a variety of symbolic ways, marking life's significant moments, from birth to death. A drink was never just a drink, it was a ritual, a symbol of transition and change. You can almost feel the weight of these moments, the sense that every sip had a deeper meaning. You might be present at a christening, a baby's tiny hand reaching out to touch a cup of wine or ale, a symbolic welcome into the community. Or you might be at a wedding, the bride and groom sharing a single goblet of wine, a physical representation of their new, shared life. The drink was a kind of liquid contract, a way to seal a vow or to solemnize a union. A quirky tidbit about this is the use of a loving cup, a large, two-handled goblet that was passed around a table at a feast. Each person would drink from it and pass it on, a symbolic act of community and brotherhood. The name itself, loving cup, speaks to the powerful emotions that were attached to this simple ritual. Historians still argue whether these symbolic uses of alcohol were a genuine expression of religious or social belief, or if they were simply a convenient way to justify drinking at a celebration. The truth is likely a bit of both. The medieval person was a pragmatic individual, and they used what they had to create meaning in their lives. The alcohol, with its ability to lower inhibitions and to create a sense of camaraderie, was the perfect tool for this purpose. You are now at a funeral feast. The air is thick with a mixture of grief and relief. You watch as a man raises his mug in a toast to the deceased, a simple, yet powerful gesture of remembrance. The ale in your hand is not just a drink, it's a way to honor the past and to affirm the continuity of life. It's a liquid testament to the human need to find meaning in a world that often felt meaningless. You take a sip, and you taste a long history of human beings grappling with the powerful and contradictory nature of life and death. The drink, you realize, is a kind of liquid sacrament, a way to mark the most important moments of the human journey. The solemnity of the funeral feast fades, and you're now seeing a new, more refined drink enter the scene. This is a crucial, mainstream historical fact. Wine was the sophisticated import that changed medieval drinking culture. While ale was the drink of the people, wine was a luxury good, a symbol of wealth and status. It was imported from warmer climates, primarily France, Spain, and Italy, and it was a drink that was prized for its taste, its complexity, and its intoxicating power. You can almost smell the rich, fruity aroma of a glass of wine, a stark contrast to the earthy, bready scent of ale. The rise of wine was a direct result of trade and commerce. As the medieval world became more interconnected, goods from distant lands became more accessible to the wealthy. Wine was one of these goods, and its presence in a household or at a feast was a clear signal of the owner's status. It was a drink that was reserved for the upper classes, and it was a powerful symbol of their wealth and sophistication. A quirky tidbit is that in some northern countries, wine was considered a kind of medicine, a drink that was believed to have healing properties. It was often mixed with spices and herbs and was used to treat everything from a cold to a broken heart. Historians still argue whether the popularity of wine was a matter of taste or a matter of snobbery. Did people genuinely prefer the taste of wine, or did they drink it simply because it was a symbol of wealth and power? The answer is likely a bit of both. The new taste was a welcome change, and the new status that came with it was a powerful motivator. The wine in your hand is not just a drink, it's a piece of history, a physical link between the past and the present. You take a final, appreciative sip, a silent toast to the thousands of merchants and sailors who risked their lives to bring this delicious, intoxicating liquid to the far corners of the world of expensive, imported wine fades. And you're now seeing the drinking experience from a new perspective. This is a crucial, mainstream historical fact. The tavern keeper's life was one of constant labor and regulation. You are now in the shoes of a publican, a person who is not just serving drinks, but is also running a business, dealing with a rowdy clientele, and navigating a complex web of social and legal obligations. You can almost feel the weight of the work, the long hours, and the constant demands of a thankless job. Your day begins long before the first patron arrives. You must clean the tables, sweep the floor, and prepare the food. You must also check your stock, ensuring you have enough ale and wine to last the night. A quirky tidbit about this is that the term publican comes from the Latin word publicanus, which originally meant a tax collector. The irony, of course, is that as a tavern keeper, you are now the one being taxed and regulated. You must pay a fee to the lord of the manor or the town council for the right to operate your business, and you must adhere to a strict set of rules about what you can sell and for how much. Historians still argue whether the tavern keeper was a respected member of the community or a person of low social standing. While they did provide a vital service, they were also often seen as a source of social disorder and a gateway to sin. The tavern was a place where people could lose their money, their dignity, and their lives, and the tavern keeper was often blamed for the consequences. You feel the weight of this responsibility, the constant need to balance the desires of your patrons with the demands of the law. You must be a bouncer, a therapist, a bartender, and a businessman all at once. A kind of one-person show that is both a source of pride and a source of constant stress. The tavern, you realize, is not just a place for getting wasted. It's a living, breathing business, a kind of organism that requires constant care and attention. You take a final, exhausted breath, a silent toast to the thousands of anonymous tavern keepers who made the medieval drinking experience possible. The dusty, practical world of the tavern keeper fades, and you are once again transported to a world of wealth and luxury. You find yourself in the great hall of a magnificent castle, but this time, you're not at a formal feast. You're at a much more private and intimate gathering. This is a crucial, mainstream historical fact. Drinking in castles and great halls had its own unique, and still very heavy, culture. While the royal feasts were about a public display of power, the private drinking in a castle was a different kind of performance. It was a time for the aristocracy to let their hair down and to engage in a kind of relaxed revelry that was a world away from the common tavern. The drinks were still luxurious, with fine wines and meads, but the atmosphere was more intimate and more casual. You watch as a group of knights, their armor now replaced with comfortable tunics, laughs and jokes with each other. The conversation is not about politics or war. It is about hunting, about women, and about the simple pleasures of a good drink. A quirky tidbit is that some castles had a cellarer, a person who was in charge of the castle's entire stock of alcohol. They were a powerful and important member of the household, a kind of liquid quartermaster who was responsible for ensuring a constant supply of ale, wine, and mead. Historians still argue whether this private drinking was a true form of social bonding or a way for the powerful to escape from the rigid social rules that governed their public lives. Was it a genuine expression of camaraderie or a kind of theatrical performance designed to create a sense of belonging? The answer is likely a bit of both. The drinking was a way for them to connect with each other on a more human level, to set aside their titles and their responsibilities, if only for a few hours, but it was also a way to reinforce their unique social standing, a silent but powerful reminder that they were a world away from the common people. You take a sip of the fine wine, and you taste a long history of wealth, power, and a kind of elegant debauchery that was a world away from the rowdy, chaotic world of the tavern. The elegant debauchery of the castle gives way to a new, more dangerous kind of drink. You are now witnessing a crucial, mainstream historical fact, the slow, fascinating emergence of distilled spirits, while ale and wine were the drinks of the past. The knowledge of distillation, which came from the Arab world, was a game changer. It was a technology that allowed for the creation of a much more potent and much more dangerous kind of alcohol. You can almost smell the sharp, fiery aroma of a new, distilled liquor, a smell that is both exciting and a little bit unsettling. The first distilled spirits were not for drinking, they were for medicine. They were known as aqua vitae, or the water of life, and they were believed to have powerful healing properties. A quirky tidbit is that the first distilled spirits were often flavored with herbs and spices to make them more palatable and to enhance their supposed medicinal benefits. They were a kind of medieval health tonic, a potent liquid that was believed to be a cure for all manner of ailments. Historians still argue whether the transition from medicine to a recreational drink was a sign of a society's increasing indulgence or a natural evolution of a new technology. The truth is likely a bit of both. As the process of distillation became more refined, and as the supply of spirits became more plentiful, people began to realize that the water of life was not just for health. It was also a powerful and effective way to get drunk. The rise of distilled spirits was a long and slow process, and it was a process that would forever change the way we drink. The alcohol in your hand, you realize, is a testament to the ingenuity and the adaptability of the human race. You take a sip of the fiery liquid, a silent toast to the thousands of alchemists and distillers who gave us a new, more powerful way to get wasted. The fiery taste of a distilled spirit fades, and you're now seeing the world of ale through a new, more professional lens. This is a crucial, mainstream historical fact. The official ale taster had a curious and vital job. In a world without modern regulations, a person was often employed by the town or the lord of the manor to ensure the quality and legality of the local brew. You can almost feel the weight of this responsibility, the sense that your job is to protect the public from bad beer. The ale taster's job was simple but important. They would visit the alehouses and the private brewers, and they would sample the ale. They would check for its strength, its flavour, and its purity. A quirky tidbit about this is that the ale taster was sometimes required to wear special leather breeches and to spill a bit of ale on a bench. If the ale was too sweet, the ale taster would literally stick to the bench, a simple but effective way to ensure the quality of the brew. It was a kind of medieval quality control, a way to ensure that the alewife was not watering down her product or adding cheap, non-traditional ingredients. Historians still argue whether the ale taster was a true public servant or a kind of low-level bureaucrat who was simply a tool of the ruling class. Was their job to protect the consumer or to ensure that the taxes on the ale were being paid? The truth is likely a bit of both. The ale taster was a person who was a part of the system, a system that was designed to ensure order, to collect taxes, and to protect the public. The ale in your hand, you realize, is a testament to this long and complicated history of regulation. You take a sip, and you taste a long history of government oversight and a long history of human beings trying to get a fair price for a good brew. The ale, you realize, is not just a drink. It's a testament to a long and complicated history of business, regulation, and a long history of a simple job that was a crucial part of the medieval world. The professional world of the ale taster fades, and you're now seeing a much darker side of medieval drinking. This is a crucial, mainstream historical fact. Drunkenness was both an excuse for crimes and a crime in itself. The legal system had a complex and often contradictory view of intoxication. On one hand, it was seen as a mitigating factor in a crime, A person who committed a crime while drunk might be seen as less culpable than a person who committed the same crime while sober. The logic was that the person's reason was impaired, and they were not in full control of their actions. But on the other hand, drunkenness was also seen as a crime in itself. A person who was found to be publicly intoxicated could be fined, put in the stocks, or even whipped. It was a kind of moral failing, a social ill that was believed to lead to other, more serious crimes. A quirky tidbit about this is that in some regions, a person who committed a crime while drunk could be given a harsher sentence, as their intoxication was seen as a form of aggravating circumstance. This was a way of punishing the person not just for the crime they committed, but for the moral failing that led to it. Historians still argue whether the legal system's view of drunkenness was a sign of a society's increasing moralism or a more pragmatic attempt to control public behavior. The truth is likely a bit of both. The law was a tool for social control, and it was used to enforce a certain set of values and behaviors, but it was also a reflection of a society's deep-seated anxiety about the powerful and unpredictable nature of alcohol. You are now in a cold, dark courtroom, a judge looking down at you with a stern, unforgiving expression. You have been accused of a crime you committed while drunk, and you are waiting to hear your fate. The room is filled with a sense of dread and a powerful reminder that in the Middle Ages, a night of fun could have a very serious and very permanent consequence. The ale in your hand is not just a drink, it is a legal and a moral liability, a substance that can change the course of your life forever. You take a final, shaky sip, a silent toast to the thousands of people who found themselves on the wrong side of a very strict and unforgiving legal system. The chilling reality of the legal system fades, and you're now seeing a much more personal and internal side of medieval drinking. This is a crucial, mainstream historical fact. Alcohol provided a vital psychological escape from the harsh realities of medieval life. Life was hard. It was filled with poverty, disease, famine, and war. The future was always uncertain, and the present was often a relentless cycle of hard labor and quiet suffering. In this context, a drink was not just a luxury, it was a necessity, a way to find a brief moment of peace and forgetfulness. You can almost feel the weight of a long day of labor, the ache in your back, the exhaustion in your bones. The tavern is a sanctuary, a place where you can set down the burden of your life, if only for a few hours. A quirky tidbit about this is that some medical texts of the time would prescribe wine or ale for people suffering from melancholy or depression. It was seen as a way to lift the spirits and to provide a temporary reprieve from the relentless sadness of life. The logic was simple. Alcohol was a powerful mood-altering substance, and it was used to alter the mood of a society that had very little to be happy about. Historians still argue whether this was a healthy form of escapism or a dangerous form of self-medication. While a brief moment of forgetfulness could provide a much-needed break from the stress of life, it could also lead to a dangerous cycle of dependence. The truth is likely a bit of both. The medieval person was a pragmatic and resilient individual, and they used whatever tools they had to survive. The alcohol, with its ability to dull the senses and to quiet the mind, was a powerful tool for survival. You take a sip of your ale, and you taste a long history of human beings trying to find a way to cope with the pain and the suffering of their lives. It's a sobering thought, a quiet reminder that for many people in the Middle Ages, a drink was not just a celebration, it was a form of survival. The psychological comfort of drinking fades, and you're now seeing a new, more economic side of the story. This is a crucial but mainstream historical fact. Brewing was a major industry that influenced trade, agriculture, and the local economy. It was not just a cottage industry, it was a powerful economic force that shaped the medieval world. You can almost see the vast fields of barley, the wagons filled with grain, and the bustling markets where the hops and spices were sold. The brewing industry was a kind of economic engine that drove the medieval world. It created jobs for the farmers who grew the barley and the hops, the merchants who transported the ingredients, and the brewers who made the finished product. A quirky tidbit about this is that in some cities, the brewing industry was so powerful that the Brewers' Guild was one of the most influential and respected in the entire city. They had the power to influence laws, to set prices, and to shape the economic landscape of the city. Historians still argue whether the economic power of the brewing industry was a sign of a society's increasing sophistication or a kind of economic trap that kept the poor dependent on a single industry. The truth is likely a bit of both. The brewing industry provided jobs and a sense of stability, but it also created a kind of economic dependence that could be dangerous in times of famine or war. You see the alewife, Agnes, not just as a business owner, but as a crucial part of a vast economic network. She is a living, breathing part of the medieval economic system, a woman who is both a beneficiary and a victim of its power. You take a sip of her brew, and you taste a long history of commerce, of trade, and of the powerful and unpredictable nature of the medieval economy. The vast economic landscape of brewing fades, and you're now seeing the humble alehouse evolve. This is a crucial, mainstream historical fact. The tavern transformed from a simple alehouse into a complex social institution and lodging. It was not just a place for drinking, it was a kind of hotel, a restaurant, and a community centre all in one. You can almost see the tavern changing, adding new rooms, new services, and new functions. The alehouse, with its simple wooden benches and its single, smoky room, was the starting point. But as the medieval world became more interconnected, the tavern began to evolve. It added rooms for travellers, a kitchen for food, and a stable for horses. It became a place where a weary traveller could find a warm bed, a hot meal, and a good drink. A quirky tidbit about this is that in some regions, the tavern keeper was legally obligated to provide a certain level of service to travellers, including a meal and a bed for a fair price. It was a kind of medieval hospitality law, a way to ensure that travellers were safe and well cared for. Historians still argue whether the evolution of the tavern was a sign of a society's increasing sophistication or a simple response to the demands of a growing economy. The truth is likely a bit of both. The tavern was a flexible and adaptable institution, and it evolved to meet the needs of a changing world. It was a place that was both a product of its time and a powerful force for change. The tavern in your mind is no longer just a smoky room with a few benches. It is a complex and fascinating institution, a living, breathing part of the medieval world that you are only just beginning to understand. You take a final sip of your ale, a silent toast to the thousands of anonymous tavern keepers who made the medieval world a little more comfortable and a little more connected. The evolving tavern fades, and you are now in the final moments of a long, wild night. This is a crucial, mainstream historical fact. The final toast was a ritual of farewell and a way to bring the night to a close. The boisterous laughter has died down, the music has stopped, and the air is filled with a low, contented murmur. You watch as a man stands, his face tired but happy, and raises his mug. He doesn't make a grand speech or a loud proclamation. He simply says, "To our good health," and takes a final, deep gulp. His friends follow suit, and the sound of clinking pottery is a gentle, quiet echo in the now empty room. These final toasts were a way of acknowledging the journey that had been taken, the memories that had been made, and the friendship that had been shared. It was a kind of quiet ritual, a way to say goodbye without having to say too much. A quirky tidbit about this is that in some regions, it was customary to leave a small amount of ale in the mug, a kind of offering to the spirits of the tavern. It was a way of showing respect for the place and for the drink that had provided so much comfort and joy. Historians still argue whether these final toasts were a genuine expression of a person's feelings or simply a part of a long-standing tradition. The truth is likely a bit of both. The ritual provided a structure for people to express their emotions, but the emotions themselves were real and heartfelt. You feel the warmth of the ale in your stomach, a final, comforting feeling before you step out into the cold, dark night. The air outside is crisp and clean, and the stars are a sharp, bright contrast to the smoky haze of the tavern. You're no longer a part of the party, but you're a part of the memory, a person who has shared in a timeless ritual of community and farewell. You walk home with a light step, a satisfied smile on your face, a feeling of deep, uncomplicated peace settling over you. The long journey into medieval intoxication has come to a close, and it ends not with a bang, but with a quiet, final toast. The final toast fades, and you're now seeing the long shadow of medieval drinking culture cast upon the present day. This is a crucial, mainstream historical fact. The legacy of medieval drinking laid the groundwork for modern pubs and craft breweries. The pubs you see today, with their dark wood, their cozy fires, and their communal atmosphere, are a direct descendant of the medieval tavern. The traditions, the rituals, and the very concept of a communal drinking space all have their roots in this ancient world. The craft brewery movement, with its focus on small batch, artisanal brews, is also a direct descendant of the medieval alewife. The brewers of today, with their passion for quality, their respect for tradition, and their love of unique and flavorful beers, are a kind of modern-day alewife, a person who is not just making a product, but is also preserving a history. A quirky tidbit about this is that many modern breweries will use the term ale or mead in their names, a kind of homage to the long history of brewing that came before them. It is a way of acknowledging the debt they owe to the thousands of anonymous brewers who came before them. Historians still argue whether the modern craft brewery movement is a true revival of medieval traditions or a modern, romanticized version of the past. The truth is likely a bit of both. The modern brewers have a scientific knowledge that the medieval brewers could only dream of, but they also have a passion and a love for the craft that is deeply rooted in the past. You take a sip of a modern craft beer, and you taste a long history of human ingenuity, a long history of a simple drink that has been perfected and refined over centuries. It's a powerful and thought-provoking sip, a reminder that the past is never truly gone. The modern echoes fade, and you're now seeing the world of medieval drinking as a source of inspiration for art and literature. This is a crucial, mainstream historical fact. Drunkenness was a common theme in medieval folklore and literature. The drunken knight, the mischievous sprite who leads a man astray, and the magical brew that grants a person extraordinary powers were all common motifs. The stories were a way of grappling with the powerful and unpredictable nature of alcohol, a way of giving a voice to a force that was both a source of great joy and great danger. You might hear a tale of a drunken knight who, in a fit of courage, slays a dragon that a sober knight could not, or a story of a mischievous sprite who leads a man astray with a magical brew, only to abandon him in a forest when the magic wears off. A quirky tidbit about this is that in some cultures, the spirits in a tavern were believed to be real, a kind of spiritual presence that was both a source of good luck and bad luck. The drinkers would often leave a small offering for the spirits, a kind of silent prayer for a good night and a safe trip home. Historians still argue whether these stories were a genuine expression of a society's beliefs or a way of teaching a moral lesson about the dangers of overindulgence. The truth is likely a bit of both. The stories were a way of making the abstract concept of drunkenness more tangible and easier to understand. They were a kind of moral compass, a way of teaching people how to navigate the powerful and unpredictable world of alcohol. You take a sip of your ale, and you taste a long history of storytelling, a long history of human beings trying to find a way to make sense of a world that was both magical and terrifying. The ale, you realize, is not just a drink, it's a kind of liquid muse, a source of inspiration for a long and powerful history of art and literature. The folklore fades, and you're now stepping out of the past and into the present. This is a crucial, mainstream historical fact. The modern pub is a direct echo of the medieval tavern, the pubs you see today, with their comfortable chairs, their warm fires, and their communal atmosphere, are a direct link to the past. The traditions, the rituals, and the very concept of a communal drinking space all have their roots in this ancient world. The modern pub is a place where you can go to escape the stress of your daily life, to connect with friends, and to feel a sense of belonging. It is a place where a stranger can become a friend, and a simple drink can become a shared experience. A quirky tidbit is that the term pub is a direct shortening of public house, a term that was used to describe a tavern that was open to the public. It is a linguistic link that highlights the long and powerful history of this institution. Historians still argue whether the modern pub is a true reflection of the medieval tavern or a sanitized, romanticized version of the past. The truth is likely a bit of both. The modern pub is cleaner, safer, and more regulated than its medieval counterpart, but the spirit of the place is the same. It is a place where people can come together to share a drink, to tell a story, and to feel a sense of community. You are now in a modern pub, a warm, inviting space that is a world away from the cold, muddy roads of the medieval world. You take a sip of your beer, and you taste a long history of human beings trying to find a way to connect with each other, to find a sense of community, and to find a home away from home. The beer, you realize, is not just a drink, it's a kind of liquid link, a bridge between the past and the present. It is a testament to the fact that some things never change. The modern pub fades, and your journey is now coming to a close. We've travelled from the smoky, chaotic taverns of the Middle Ages to the quiet, contemplative halls of the monastery. We've seen how ale was not just a drink but a life-sustaining necessity, a form of liquid bread that was safer to drink than the local water. We've seen how mead was a drink of wealth and power, a symbol of a life that was a world away from the common man. We've seen how alcohol was a part of every aspect of medieval life, from the raucous toasts in the tavern to the solemn rituals of a christening or a funeral. We've seen how it was both a cause of chaos and a source of comfort, a substance that was both a blessing and a curse. We've learned about the alewife, a woman of power and a target of suspicion. We've learned about the early temperance movements, a quiet protest against the excesses of a drunken society. And we've learned about the long, slow evolution of brewing, a process that changed a simple, homemade brew into a global commodity. As we end our journey, I invite you to take a final, deep breath. The images of the past begin to fade, the sounds of the tavern and the castle grow softer, and the feeling of the medieval world gently recedes. The weight of the world, the constant noise, and the endless stream of thoughts all begin to fade away. Just let it all go. A gentle sigh into the night. Feel the coolness of the air on your skin, and the quiet rhythm of your own breathing. The journey is over, and you are safe and sound, here and now. The stories of the past are a part of you now, a quiet, comforting hum in the background of your mind. You are a part of a long and beautiful history, a history that is filled with both joy and pain, with both light and shadow, and with both great chaos and great comfort. You are a part of it all. You are home. Rest now. End of script. Sweet dreams.